There's always a rising chatter of conversation when students trickle into a college classroom. I'm a pretty relational instructor, and I know my students pretty well, enough to note that one morning, one looked withdrawn. She was slumped in her chair, and her eyes looked a little bit less alive. I noticed her, gave her a fist bump and a nod, and then got on with my class. Several years later, I ran into that same student at a coffee shop, and we briefly caught up. Toward the end of our rushed conversation, she shared that story about the fist bump with me and how it changed her life. Now, I didn't know any of this that morning, but she was enduring a really terrible time and just needed something good to happen. I saw her, we shared a moment, and that was apparently good enough. I don't remember that happening, but she did. I like to believe that day I'd shown up and was ready to do a good job teaching my class, but I guarantee you she wasn't there for whatever I was going to say. She was there because she had nowhere else to go. I also guarantee you that no one else remembers anything about that class that day, or that it even happened at all. No one but her. We like to tell ourselves that education is this grand linear odyssey, but actually most of us are made of small moments like that one. I want you all to think of a transformative moment, something that happened in your life that changed the direction of it. I'll give you all a few seconds. Where did your memory take you? Was it to a really well-designed presentation slide in a class you took, or a work meeting you attended? Or was it you as a child sitting on your grandparents' porch? Was it the first time you heard your future partner laugh, the birth or death of a loved one? Maybe even just a nice moment that you shared in passing with a stranger. I bet you it was that second category of memory, the one with connection, the one with genuine, undivided attention. That's the sort of educational moment that instructors dream of, one that teaches us more than a curriculum ever could. Yet why have we strayed so far away from those moments in our classrooms? How many students in our care who have been so desperately in need of a moment, just like one of those, have we let drift by as we've spent our time doing stuff that doesn't really matter? I'm a professor at a big university, and I teach lots of classes, but I don't lecture to big groups of students. I think lectures are boring. I try and use that time to build relationships and do things together. I try and embed myself into the academic journeys of my students so they get to know me as much as I get to know them. I think about my role in learning a lot. I think about my students all the time. What is the value of a college education? And I'm not talking about things like graduation rates and employment metrics and student loan debt, but something more foundational. What about a college experience changes the lives of students as people? Here's something I think we often don't think about. For most college students, this is the only time in their lives where they're going to live in a community of peers, all within walking distance. Outside of a handful of major cities, that never happens in the US. That's an extraordinary opportunity for learning, and one that does not require setting foot into a classroom. It's about proximity and shared experience and the sort of connection that only happens when people live closely with one another. Yet, in this generation of rapid technological change, from the dot-com era in the 90s to AI today, we seemingly doubled down on the part of education that's becoming less relevant: content delivery in a classroom. Now, that may sound like a career-destroying thing, like someone for me to say, but I want you all to think through my statement again. I said that content delivery in a classroom is becoming less relevant, not the knowledge one gains from learning. Students want to be challenged, and they want to do hard things. They just have to know that what they're doing is worth more than a score on a screen, that what they're doing will carry them forward into their lives. Sure, teaching doing rather than knowing is hard and takes trust and patience. which is only really possible when people feel valued. I try hard every day to help my students become better people. And at the same time, I'm deeply cynical about most standard college classroom experiences because honestly, I don't think much of it matters. I'm a product of all my experiences and wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for all those classes I sat through when I was in college, but I only remember a couple things that my instructors ever said. And I guarantee you that being forgettable was not what they were hoping to do. Yet, being forgettable is often what we are. We don't admit that to ourselves, but we often acknowledge it in the words we use to describe what we do in the classroom. I'll give you an example. Excuse me, Mr. Student. What do you mean you don't remember that? We covered it a week ago. Covered. That's a superficial word, one that speaks nothing of depth. Of course the students don't remember it. It wasn't all that important for them to learn in the first place. If it was, we would have done more than covered it. We talk a lot about the value of college education in our society nowadays, but just end up objectifying it. I think it's more useful to think about what makes the college experience special and then derive value from that. Historically, college was a source of knowledge. Academics like me were the gatekeepers of that knowledge. But now there are free systems that provide all that knowledge and so much more instantaneously to anybody. Why would a student spend countless hours memorizing facts that they'll probably promptly forget for an online exam just to maybe get some of those questions wrong and get a worse grade when they can query AI to give them the correct answer in seconds? Sure, they don't develop the independent problem-solving skills you learn from figuring your mistakes, but that's not really assessed in tests anyway. Why would a student endure the time-consuming and painful process of learning how to write well when AI can generate text for you? Especially when your instructors are too busy to review your work and give you meaningful feedback in the first place. If not knowledge, then what about college is special? It's the opportunity for connection. Where else in our society today do young people gather together and engage in intellectual pursuits? Especially in an environment where we can make them put their phones down every once in a while. The best classes form relationships between instructors and students so that people come together and form vibrant learning communities and develop durable processes together, like information literacy, critical thinking, and workforce readiness skills. And let the content come when it does, in support of the skill, rather than the other way around. Yeah, it takes a lot of time and requires trust and patience, which is only really possible based upon the strength of relationships. However, as we continue to use our historically practiced effort of teaching content first in the classroom, we increasingly abandon the very people we started these careers to help, our students. The solutions aren't complicated, and we see them employed successfully again and again in systems that value connection over scale. Small classes, less content, more skill development, and more attention to students as people. Now, some of my colleagues in big programs may say that that environment is a fantasy, especially in an era of increasingly corporatized higher education with huge lecture classes and online asynchronous learning. And they may not be wrong, but it doesn't mean that it's a message any less worth advocating for. We can't change systems, but we can change our classes. And we can do things to help our students realize that what they can do actually matters. In my college at the University of Kentucky, we've tried to embody this practice through a Students as Partners program called Growing Graduates from the Ground Up. The premise is simple. Students are expert learners. They've sat through years of classes. They know what works, what doesn't, and how it feels like to drift aimlessly through a class without connection. So we invite them to the table, not as focus group participants or survey takers, but as meaningful collaborators in changing their own education. They form close relationships with their peers and their instructional partners, and those relationships empower innovation. They change syllabi, they redesign assignments, they challenge assumptions about how classes should run. The cohort is small, and deliberately so, because these students aren't anonymous. They're known, and they're powerful. And here's something that surprises a lot of people when I tell them about this. These innovation classes, they don't get easier. They get harder. The students demand it. It turns out when you trust students to design their own learning systems, they don't water it down, they raise the bar. Because now the struggle means something. A student partner told me this, and I think about it all the time. She told me, I've never felt that most of what I'd done in college really mattered. I go to class, I take a test, I write a paper, whatever, I get a grade. But then it all goes away, like it meant nothing. Now, I get to be part of designing a class to be like the one I've always wanted to take. One where my effort matters, where I matter. She's not describing a revolutionary concept. She was describing what it felt like to be seen and trusted inside a system that can often afford neither. I'm at a pretty cool place in my life because I get to spend every day with hundreds of young people and see the power of attention. And see how that attention creates moments of connection. And then get to see how that connection grows into relationships that then, and only then, make meaningful learning possible. I think about that moment with that student at the coffee shop all the time. It happened a long time ago, and I'm sure she doesn't remember it, but I do. Now, she didn't know any of this, but that morning, I was the one who needed something good to happen. I was slumped in my chair. My eyes looked a little bit less alive. The changing world around me was making me question everything about who I thought I was, and whether any of this, the teaching, the connecting, the caring, actually mattered. It was a real existential crisis, suffered alone in the middle of everybody. But then I caught her attention, and she gave me a little fist bump of a connection. And she changed my life that morning because she showed me that this stuff does matter. Attention, connection, relationship, change. Just one person who'd been seen and remember what it felt like saw me and passed it on. That's what an education should do. Not convey content, anything can do that now, but create the conditions for two people to see each other, and in doing so, change the direction of their lives. No curriculum teaches it, no system scales it, and no algorithm predicts it, but you could do it. I really want you to do it. And because we're doing this thing right now, I think I can try and make you do it. So, since I am a professor, and we're nearing the end of a lecture, I'm going to assign you some homework. Are you ready? Notice someone. Give them your full attention. The student who sits in the back, the colleague who's been kind of quiet lately, the person next to you right now. If they give you pause, stop for a moment. You don't need words. Maybe just some eye contact and a smile. You don't even have to remember it afterward. But they may remember. Just like how my student remembered me. Just like how I'll never forget her. That's a curriculum that matters. One person giving their attention to another, and being remembered for it. That's what makes an education meaningful. We're just forgetting the value of teaching that way.